As graphic designers, although we live in a very digital world, print design and packaging is still very much alive, and learning how to set up your print files correctly so that the print house knows how to interpret those files is so important in graphic design. Now, when I talk about print design, this could be something as small as a sticker or a flyer or a business card. It could be something like a poster, packaging design, or even something as big as a billboard. If you're designing something that needs to be printed, this video is for you. Welcome back to HanSelah. I'm Han, and in today's video we're talking all about print design, how to set up your files, the correct specs that you need, how to export them correctly, and how to just make it a smooth printing process for your printer in order for you to have a perfectly print-ready document. The reason we have to set up and export our print files correctly is to ensure that we have no color issues, no missing links, no missing fonts, and all that jazz. So welcome to your graphic designer's beginner guide to setting up and exporting print-ready files and documents. I'm also going to go in depth into packaging and how you can set up your packaging design files for the print house. This includes having things like the correct bleed, cut lines, fold lines, trim marks, printer's marks, registration marks, color bars, and all the other things that come with packaging design. So Section 1 is setting up your document for print correctly. First, we're going to start by setting up your document at the correct size. Because it is a printed document, we work in millimeters. If you're American, I think they prefer to use inches, but South Africa, we use millimeters. You also want to have the correct resolution, so for print you always have 300 dpi, and for the color mode we're going to set it to CMYK. Resolution refers to the clarity of an image, and this is usually measured in dpi or dots per inch. So as I said, 300 dpi is the standard for print. It is the highest quality. You're going to have nice, crisp, clear, clean images. CMYK stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and key. The key is black. All printed documents are printed with these 4 colors. They are on 4 different panels or 4 different plates, and it goes through a process of printing each layer of color. Every single printed document uses that unless you're using Pantones or spot colors. Another thing I want to show you quickly is when you open your file, the first thing you're going to want to do is head over to your swatches. You're going to select this little burger menu on the right, and then you're going to click select all unused color swatches, and you're going to delete them. So now what you can do is when you go back into your document and you start creating colors and putting them in, you're only going to have your used color swatches in your color swatch. And one more thing is also converting all of your colors into global colors. So when it comes to printing in CMYK, we have process colors and spot colors. Spot colors are obviously your Pantones, and your process colors are CMYK. Now we also have something called a global color. Global colors are really cool because you can select a global color, and basically if you then change or update that color swatch, it's going to change all of the other global colors in that exact color swatch. So as you can see here, I've selected all of these purple ones, and now they've all turned to blue. But if it was not set to a global color, it's not going to change. When you have a global color, it's going to have this little triangular corner in the bottom right, this little white triangle. And when you change the process color to a spot color or a Pantone, it's going to put a little dot. So that's just a fun fact, additional information. I'll go into more info about that if you guys want, so let me know in the comments. But let's pause it there and let's go back to print design because I don't want to get distracted in this video. I'm not going to go into too much detail about color because this video is about printing and not color. But for digital, we use RGB, and then we also have another color spec which is called Pantones. Pantones are part of the Pantone matching system, or PMS. They're also known as spot colors. And Pantones are basically a standardized color to make sure that you have complete color accuracy throughout your documents. Pantones are very expensive to print, which is why they are not used as commonly. If you want to know more about color and color modes and color codes, let me know in the comments and I'll make a video all about color for you, including your Pantones and how to access them. But in the meantime, we're moving on to section 2, which is bleed and trim marks. So when a graphic designer refers to bleed, we're actually talking about the little space that's around the document. It falls on the outside of the trim edge of your design. So this is the area around the document where your images or your text or your colors or your patterns will actually extend further. Printers will use bleed to ensure that your design prints edge to edge, which basically means you're not going to have a white border around the edges of it. It's going to go fully off to the end of the page. Generally speaking, we use a 3mm bleed on most documents. That's the standardized bleed. On larger things such as a billboard, it can extend to 5mm, but for the most part, it's generally 3. So in reality, it's like really tiny, but it makes all the difference. We add bleed just in case the document shifts or the printer is not completely accurately straight. It allows for 3 millimeters of like leeway so that it can print to the edge of the page. There are different ways that you can set up your bleed. If you want it on your full whole document, you can do it when you're setting up your document, or once you're in Illustrator and you haven't set your bleed, you can add it by going to your document setup. And the third way is more for odd shapes. For example, this is what we use for packaging design. We will select our object and then create an offset path of 3 millimeters. Then we have trim marks, which are also referred to as crop marks. This basically indicates where the printer should crop or cut the design. Trim marks are the little lines that you see on the corners of the edges of the design, and it indicates where the final cut will be. If you have bleed on your document, the bleed will go into the crop line and then it crops off the bleed, obviously. So when you're exporting your document for print, make sure that you always have your trim marks or your crop marks and your bleed. So now let's move on to section 3, which is packaging design. This is probably the biggest section of print design, I would say, and it can be a little bit more complex. So in order to show you how to accurately set up your packaging design for a print document, I'm going to hop over onto Pacdora today and just show you how they do it. Pacdora is an all-in-one packaging design tool. I personally absolutely love Pacdora, and Pacdora is also the sponsors of today's video. I will tell you a little bit more about Pacdora as we're going through it, but as you can see here, when you open up Pacdora, they have a bunch of different pre-existing die lines, 3D mockups, video animations. They also have a scene generator, so you can do all of your packaging design within Pacdora. You can also download their templates and their die lines to Illustrator, where you have even more customization. If you prefer, you can also design online. It is quite nice to have a browser-based software because I can open the files on the go if I need to. It can take quite a long time to design a packaging die line from scratch, but Pacdora allows for complete customization of their templates, which is really cool because I can change the measurements, the color, the cardboard, the texture. I can then also create a mock-up of it. I can create a 3D scene, an animation. I can unfold it. I can fold it back up. So there's so much that I can do with Pacdora. If you would like to try Pacdora today, you can get 20% off using my discount code HanSelah at checkout. So when I'm talking about packaging design, what exactly is a die line? Well, the die line is basically a blueprint for your packaging design. Technically, think of it as a flat printed out version of your packaging. So every single box that you have that's made up into a box shape can be printed flat on a page. For example, if you look at this YSL sleeve that I got, this was my Black Friday buy. Oh my goodness, it's so beautiful. But if you look at this sleeve, you can see where it's been folded and glued and stuck. So this is a form of packaging, and you can actually open this and flatten it and print it as a flat piece of paper. Now the same will go for the lid of the box. It can also be opened up and flattened down and printed as a piece of paper. Obviously, the printer can't print a 3D object. It needs to print something flat, and then it gets folded, cut, scored, and glued together. The last goes for the actual products inside the box. So this insert will have its own die line, and the base of the box will also have its own die line. And then if we look at the actual product itself, this will also go through its own printing process as well because it is packaging design. Obviously, this also has gold foil on the front, so this will also need a specialized form of printing to have this gold metallic printed. So when you set up your document, this will actually be on a complete different layer because it's a different type of ink that they use. Here I have another example. It's a Valentino perfume that I have. As you can see, I love perfume. But if we open up the box over here, we would actually be able to undo the glue and flatten this out. So let's open this up actually, and I can show you what I mean. For example, this is a box of tea that I bought when I was in Russia, and I've unfolded it so you can see the die line, but this is what a die line is. It's basically the flat version of the box. So if I had to now fold this up and glue it together, it would create the tea box. I'm using my chin just so it doesn't unravel, but this is what it looked like when I bought it. There you go, like that. And you can see here the box has a window in the front as well, so this is where the product kind of peeps through. But if you unfold it, this is what a die line is. It's basically the blueprint, it's the flattened version of the box, and every single piece of packaging that you receive has to be able to be printed on a flat piece of paper, because obviously a printer can't randomly just print a box in 3 dimension, so the printer needs to be able to print your die line flat on a piece of cardstock. Die lines are also known as die cuts, and generally when we are creating them, we do them in a 0.25 stroke width. We also like to put them on different layers. So the die cut, the trim line will be on one layer, the fold or crease lines will be on another layer, the glue will be on another layer. If you need specialized printing, such as the YSL with the gold leaf print, that would be done in a spot color on a separate layer. So there are a lot of nitty-gritty things that you need to understand for setting up your document for print. When you have a cut line, that is always a solid line. When you have a fold line, that is always a dotted line or a dashed line, again in 0.25 stroke. So when we're talking about packaging, we always have a trim line, which is the cut line, which is a solid line. Then we have the fold line, which is a dashed line. And this indicates where it's going to be folded and scored once it's printed. When you score something, or if they talk about the score line, this is where we make a crease on the paper or the cardstock, especially if it is very thick cardstock. And this is so that the paper or the card doesn't crack. So we'll make a little pre-made crease or score, and then it makes it much easier to fold it without damaging the packaging. And then we have our glue or seal areas. So the glue and seal areas are also marked on your die line or your die cut. And this is where the glue will be applied to assemble the packaging. Generally, we don't like to put a lot of ink on wherever we are gluing, otherwise it's not going to stick well. So for the most part, this is how we would show where the glue would go. Oftentimes people will put tiny little lines or little dots or little crosses or a single line, but generally we don't like to put a lot of ink at all. Your die line will also have its own individual bleed, so it'll be 3mm, so that actually needs to go directly on top of the die line. So when you are exporting your design, we'll always add the die line to a separate layer, and we will put that above the artwork layer. Now I know there is a lot to learn when it comes to packaging design, and it can be quite tiring to remember all these different things. And having to create packaging design from scratch is not an easy process. You have to have exact measurements, you need to make sure everything folds correctly, you need to make sure that you haven't left out any panels, you need to make sure we have the little flappy glue, make sure the fold lines are this and your cut lines are that, and make sure you have your bleed. And do you need a slug? Do you need to tell the printer something? When I talk about a slug is not a snail without a shell. In graphic design, your slug is another area on top of, like, extending past your bleed, where you can add notes to tell your printer certain messages. So if there's some sort of important information, you will put that in the slug. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is Pacdora makes this process a lot more simplified, a lot faster, and on top of this, I can create beautiful mock-ups and scenes and 3D animations and videos. So if you would like to try Pacdora, you can get 20% off using my discount code HanSelah at checkout. I personally love using Pacdora because I can browse all of their templates and their mockups without having to create a box completely from scratch. My favorite part is I can actually download the die lines to Illustrator, and that allows for even more customization. So I can then build the packaging design in Illustrator and then re-upload that back into Pacdora to create the mockups and scenes. Okay, so now that we have covered packaging design, we're now going to move on to the fourth and final section of this video, which is exporting your PDF file for print. So, how do we actually export all of this information? Personally, I recommend and like to export my PDF files as a PDF X1A. What on earth is a PDF X1A? Well, basically, the PDF X1A is a type of PDF standard that eliminates the likelihood of printing issues. So things like missing fonts, incorrect color space, or missing links, this won't really affect the PDF X1A PDF standard. So PDF X1A is just a better file type to supply to your print house because it just allows for less things to go wrong, basically. For example, with PDF X1A, it only allows for a CMYK color space, so you actually can't export it if it's an RGB. You also have to embed all of your fonts, so that eliminates any sort of missing fonts, because usually you have to supply your fonts to the printer as well to make sure that they have the correct fonts, that there's no mismatch. So it's always good to send your printer the fonts as well, but with PDF X1A, it does embed those fonts. PDF X1A also can't contain any sort of interactive elements. So if you have a video or a moving picture or a GIF, if you have audio, if you have a hyperlink, or if you've added JavaScript, none of that is going to be compatible with the PDF X1A because obviously it's a print document. You can't print a hyperlink. The whole document also uses one ICC profile, so an ICC color profile that, again, if you want to learn more about color, I can make that in a separate video. But basically, when you have an ICC profile for the whole document rather than individual elements, it just ensures that the color remains consistent over the entire document because it's all in one color profile. These are just some of the reasons why I personally like the PDF X1A file format and why I recommend people export and save it like that. In my opinion, it's the best PDF standard for high quality print ready documents. I obviously use PDF X1A, but you can use any of the PDFX file formats. I think there's PDFX3 and PDFX4. I think those are slightly more recent. The compatibility with those ones are slightly different. I know one has something to do with the transparency can't be flattened, or it can, something like that. So you just have to look into what the difference are, but personal opinion is PDF X1A is a great file format. Also, when you export your file, you may need to add something called registration marks. Now, your registration marks are basically these little like target icons that you see on the corner of your pages when you print. So the registration marks just ensure that you have proper alignment, especially when you're printing with multiple printing plates. So when it comes to multicolor prints, registration marks are crucial because obviously we have CMYK, that's 4 different plates that are printing. So it's great to have good alignment. And the last thing that you may see when you're exporting your file is the slug area. We touched on this a little bit earlier. It's not really used as commonly. I think lots of people don't actually know what the slug is. But again, it's just that extra space around your bleed. The slug will often contain important technical or production details. And then lastly, if you're on InDesign, for example, you may get something called a pre-flight check pop-up. The pre-flight check is basically a review process to ensure that your file meets all of the specifications for print production. It'll basically verify your resolution and your bleed, and if you have any overset text, it'll have your color mode, the correct fonts, your linked images, etc. So to end things off, this is the checklist that you need to make sure that you have. So obviously you have it in millimeters and not pixels, so the correct size, the correct resolution is 300 dpi for print, the correct color mode is CMYK for printing. You're going to want to make sure that you have your 3mm bleed added to your entire document or to your individual element, such as your packaging die line. You're going to want to make sure if you're doing packaging that you have your fold line in a 0.25 stroke width dashed line and your cut line is in a 0.25 solid line. If you have any important technical or production information, you're going to add a slug on top of your bleed. Make sure that you have embedded your images, you have converted your fonts to outlines or embedded them as well to avoid any printing issues with missing fonts. And then you're going to export it in your correct PDF format, PDF X1A. Make sure that you have your registration and color bars on. I think that's everything that I can think of off the top of my head that we went through. Knowing all of these terms and best practices is just going to make your graphic design journey a lot smoother. So I hope this video has helped you understand how to accurately set up your files for print, how to prepare them, and how to export them. So these are the foundations of print design. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video and that you learned something about setting up and exporting your files for print and packaging design. Have a lovely day wherever you are in the world, and I'll see you guys soon. Please give this video a like and subscribe if you want to see more graphic design related content like this. If you enjoyed this packaging design video, I think this will be very informative for you as well. Okay, have a lovely one guys. Bye!